Realizing the transition today, so I want you to all come and sit down, have a seat. We're going to have Samir Ronaday coming up here with some poetry, and then following that we have a very special appearance of Bill Moyers from Backbone Campaign, and he's going to be talking about Solutionary Rail. So one of the things that we're going to be thinking of is how do we move forward in the transition, and Solutionary Rail is a book that is out on most bookstores, Amazon, and etc. Go to the bookstores, please. And his book is available, and I will bring him up after Samir has some poetry for us to start the day out. Enjoy the Green Life Festival.
Oh, hold the wait, what's that? Hold the mic? Yeah, I do, I will, yeah. Hi, good morning everyone. This is so exciting to be here. This is like my second Green Life at West Seattle. I think it's really great. So on the subject of transition and moving to a clean energy economy, that's what I want to talk about. That's what I'm really excited about. And I want to let you know about this incredible coalition that is advocating for a policy in Washington State that will address climate change, make our state a leader in solving this problem. It's called the Alliance for Jobs and Clean Energy. And we are going to go, if it takes us to go to the ballot in 2018, then we're going to go to the ballot with a policy that will address climate change, put a price on pollution, invest in clean energy, in forests, in water, provide new energy jobs, energy efficient buildings, reducing traffic congestion, improving public health, protecting our oceans, our salmon. There's a lot of good things that are going to happen as a result of this policy. So as you can tell, I'm really passionate about the environment. So I have written a couple of rhymes that I'm going to share on building a green economy. I want to heal social divisions, look at racial disparity in prisons. I want my economy to be green and fair. Every kid deserves a chance to breathe clean air. I want to generate power every time there's a wind gust and create green jobs that are busts. Harness the geothermal energy beneath the Earth's crust. Pass legislation that spurs economic development and job creation. Create jobs at universities with critical funding for R&D. We can store excess solar with flywheels by enacting a new Green Deal. We'll create sustainable jobs using American steel, like Solutionary Rail. Support recreation work through making trials. Everyone deserves to earn a wage to help them prevail, whether it's outdoor construction or retail. How great does the opportunity seem to make our future prosper by working with Community Green? Harness the clean tech revolution. Create jobs from cutting pollution. I urge you to get vocal. Advocate your legislators for local support. It's an economic engine, says every credible report. Such classes will give the brain a jolt, like when Ben Franklin was struck by the bolt. Just talk to a teacher who specializes in low volt power, showing students how to model uber efficient wind towers. I know we're in hard times, but taking care of the earth is key to reverse the economic decline. Let me articulate the value of green building design. Natural lighting will save the public money. Architects know how to make the most of when it's bright and sunny. Slashing energy waste. Modernizing our schools to make them healthy and safe. Do one more. So I'm really, one of the people I'm really inspired by is Van Jones. He has this great show called The Messy Truth because it's about bringing people together and trying to build bridges. He goes out to Trump voters, he talks to them and tries to connect with them, and I think that type of stuff is really good. So, inspired by the likes of Van Jones, as a warrior for justice, I don't stand alone. In my neighborhood, I see a lot of orange cones because we're making a green development zone. Save water by fixing leaky pipes beneath the street and plugging up methane leaks. Forget natural gas, there's jobs to be made from using geothermal for heat. We have flywheels on hand to provide power during peak demand. From making this building more efficient, we'll save $100 grand. I've got a city master plan, electrify everything we can, like golf carts, buses, and trams. Create the right jobs manufacturing clean energy products right here. Before I'm through, I will electrify the equipment provided by John Deere. So, last thing I wanted to do is just encourage everybody. I want to leave at least with like 5 signups. At least 5, so please sign up at the table over there with the Alliance for Jobs and Clean Energy, because we are a really unique and important coalition that's bringing people together around making life better for everybody and addressing climate change with the statewide initiative. So please sign up there. And the next person I want to introduce is somebody who's really inspiring and passionate and advocating for a clean energy economy in a way that's going to create jobs, spur local economic development, and have that clean tech revolution and put Washington as a hub, make Washington a leader, a hub of innovation and technology. His name is Bill Moyers, and he has a group called Solutionary Rail, the Backbone Campaign, and he's going to talk more about it. Bill, are you ready? Or we can wait up. Okay, yeah. And so, we're good, all in the neighborhood. I don't want to have burned wood. Instead, I want geothermal heat and rhyme to the beat.
Yeah, right on. Way better than me. I don't do that freestyle thing. That's dangerous. Hey, everybody. My name is Bill. What's your name? Melinda. Good to meet you. Good to see you here. How about yourself? Simon. So, and you're, young lady, Hildegard. Simon Hildegard. And Melinda. All right. Well, my name is Bill Moyer. I'm neither possessive nor plural. And I co-founded the group called the Backbone Campaign in about 2003, 2004 with a bunch of artist friends. Since it's kind of a small crowd, I invite you to come, and hang out close by if you like. Solutionary Rail evolved out of this sense that our opposition to the things we dislike about the society is only as powerful as our yes is compelling. And it doesn't help us strategically to lock down to the tracks and do protests or be out there in kayaks in Elliott Bay unless we have a vision for the future or something different than what people are experiencing now, and something that they can believe in, something that appeals to their deepest aspirations and values. I'm reading a book on Viking economics right now. The social contract in the Nordic countries, and we often refer to those countries as an ideal in regards to society and policy and government organized for the public good. But it wasn't always the case. They didn't just magically have that inclination. There was a lot of struggle that happened to get to that. I think it was in 1913 or something. They had 99 strikes in that one year. And then the next year they had 103 strikes. Power concedes nothing unless it's forced to do that. But we have to be able to bring people together around a vision that compels them to take action. One of the really interesting things about the book, The Viking Economics, was the clarity with which the author speaks about what is the source of the social contract, what's the organizing principle of the society that in the Nordic countries versus what we experience here. And it's very clear. The owners in the society exist in service and of the rest of us. The labor and normal working people don't exist in service of the owners in the society. We don't exist in service of the rich or the corporations. Those corporations and those rich have privilege but they have it to serve us. And that's a completely 180-degree flip-flop of the social contract that's currently operative in this society. Right now, we do everything we can to serve giant corporations, etc., and we give rights to corporations, to investors, to transnational capital itself. When really, and what that assumes, when you give something a right, rights aren't just claimed, they're based, they're derivative. They derive from some fundamental value, something you hold sacred, self-evident, endowed by Creator. And in a society where winner takes all and the elect are somehow sanctified, the inequality that creates in our society creates an ethic that justifies the infinite accumulation of power and wealth. And what we really need is a society that holds life, this journey, each person, their genius, their participation in the community, their sense of the beautiful place that sustains them, their obligations to future generations. We should hold all of those things as sacred, as beyond price, as not for sale, ever. And it's that society, and it's that ethic of that we're all in this together, not a winner-take-all society, that we must strive for in the movements and in the engagement that we seek and the change that we seek. And I think what the greater our clarity is in regards to what we're offering instead, the more effective we'll be at drawing others in. So a lot of the work that I do is around strategy and tactics. And there's a principle in grand strategy that the fundamental goal of campaigns, of our tactics, etc., is to expand alliances, to increase the cohesion amongst those allies, the solidarity, and the resolve of our people. The resolve that people are engaging with us in a way that's resonant with their deepest aspirations and values. So when a guy who worked for the railroads came up to me, actually we were having a conversation over about a year, and he had chosen to ally with Peabody Coal, BNSF Railroad, and Gateway Pacific Terminals, because he was defending a few jobs up in Bellingham for that coal export facility. So Mike Elliott is a great guy. He said, it was up to me, I'd nationalize the railroads. I thought, wow, that's a really interesting guy. So when a year later he said to me, we did this study of the Northern Corridor, the rail corridor from Seattle to Chicago. Why don't you see if your people can green it? Well, to me, that seemed like a really important challenge, a great opportunity to sow an alliance with labor and environmentalists, sustainability advocates. So I recruited a team of railroad experts, and I didn't know a damn thing about rail electrification. I didn't know that the rest of the world is doing it. But over a year or two, I started to learn about this. And the more I learned about it, the more convinced I became that this doesn't just appeal to workers, rail workers. It doesn't just appeal to environmentalists. The situation of rail in this country and the way we do freight transport poisons communities that all these trucks and these diesel trucks and trains and ships go through. So Solutionary Rail is an answer to that challenge. And it is we did a book, which you can get, it's here on the stage. Solutionary Rail is an answer to Mike Elliott's challenge. And we've looked at rail across the U.S., tried to understand why we're not doing what the rest of the world is doing, electrifying it and running rail and other transport on renewable energy. And tried to answer, how do we get beyond the obstacles that we face currently? So there was another group called the Steel Interstate Coalition, and they had this idea that we should be able to move freight off of the trucks that do a lot of damage to our rails and back onto tracks. And we can power it with renewable energy, and that would be an alternative to building highway systems. That trains are inherently more aerodynamic. The steel on steel of a train is 10 times more efficient, or at least, 5 to 10 times more efficient than the rubber on the pavement. So even if you don't electrify a train, you're still gaining a lot of efficiency. But the trains currently are diesel electric, meaning the electricity that runs the trucks or the wheels that move the locomotive is generated by diesel. Well, diesel is both dirty, but it's also inefficient to generate electricity with a fossil fuel internal combustion engine. So, and electric engines and locomotives are more efficient and easier to operate and maintain. So those are some of the benefits. Some people say, "Oh, it can't be done. You know, we live in harsh territory." Blah 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 blah. Well, the Trans-Siberian Railroad was completely electrified in 2002. It was finished. The electrification of the Trans-Siberian Railroad was finished in 2002. So this is not an issue of the advantages of diesel versus electrification. Here's a chart with some of the countries, and if you can't see it, it just demonstrates that the rest of the world is electrifying their rail. Italy has about 64% of its rail electrified already. And if you consider how many tracks exist in a place, and how many of them are minor or major tracks, 64% is a lot of rail. Switzerland is actually 100% electrified, and the trucks. If on this photo, you could see that the trucks are actually loaded onto trains and transported on the electrified rail. So they're not passing through the country. They're not on their freeway system. Even Ethiopia is electrifying their rail. They are about 74% of that rail is going to be freight, and the rest is for passenger transport. So why not in the U.S.? Well, one of the things is that our freight rail system is principally private, almost exclusively. And it has been since the beginning. There was one period around World War I that it was temporarily nationalized, but basically it's private. And the ownership is very fragmented. And they share track all the time. So it's difficult if you don't have an integrated system to electrify just a piece. So there's a need to make sure that there are large corridors are electrified. The public, the taxpayers, we subsidize the transport of freight already on our publicly subsidized freeway system. Hey, there's our Backbone Campaign's giant orca. Yay! Oh, it's a little hard to steer with those front fins. Don't take down the booth. Yeah. This is like building a ship in your garage or basement or something. Way to go. Go team. Let's hear it for the orca. Yay. All right. So our system is already publicly subsidized, and not the freight system, not the freight rail system, but the freight transport that happens on our interstates. The upfront capitalization costs in our society with our corporate private freight system is also an obstacle. The quarterly profits driven market business model and the is difficult it's difficult in that model to make the case for an investment that may take 30 to 50 years to pay back. It's not actually that expensive to electrify rail. Some of the numbers on Sound Transit are around $54 billion, right? Jay Inslee's high-speed rail thing that he pushed recently and is doing a feasibility study. They're talking about $125 million to $1 billion per mile for that system. The electrification aspect of using existing railroads is approximately $2.5 million per mile for double track. So yes, there would be other needs like expensive things like the ease. What do you call? My brain is just skipped a beat. When you separate the roads from the track, grade separation. Thank you. So those are some of the obstacles. Another big obstacle is that railroads would pay a tax on the property, on the improvements of the rail system, and that the property taxes that would impede their investment in that. So, how do we overcome those challenges? What we're proposing with Solutionary Rail is that a tax-exempt collaboration between states, tax-exempt entities such as states, tribes, or even rural electrical cooperatives, collaborate with the railroads to invest in the rail electrification. So you don't increase the property tax burden of the freight rail companies. The public can issue bonds to finance a system that would have a payback that's a longer payback than the private companies return on investment than the private companies would be willing to make. So we call this a public belt. So it's an overlay of public ownership of the rail electrification and transmission infrastructure over the private rail right-of-way. Because a lot of our work has been to oppose the fossil fuel extraction and transport across the Northern Corridor from the Bakken oil and Powder River Basin coal, our concentration was to have a yes. What is our yes? What do we want from the Northern Transcon? And how can we better serve this region and build jobs and rural economies? And thus, Solutionary Rail has, for the most part in our book, concentrated on the Northern Corridor. The Northern Corridor is actually about 2,200 miles, but it's actually there are a couple of routes. So together, it's about 4,400 miles that stretch from Washington State to Illinois or Chicago. That one of the advantages of this corridor is it's all the tracks that we've identified are principally owned by BNSF. And that's BNSF is owned by Berkshire Hathaway, and the principal of Berkshire Hathaway is Warren Buffett. There are other corridors that would really benefit from rail electrification as well in the U.S. The Southern Transcon from Long Beach, L.A., up through Kansas City to Chicago, that would be another prime candidate for electrification. And because of California's leadership in decarbonizing transport, there's a lot of potential in California to lead this fight. Regardless, it's important as we talk about a transition, a decarbonized transition, that we talk about what that looks like for workers, for communities, and how to build an alliance from the bottom up that makes this an inevitable rather than an impossible vision. So one thing is to tell people, hey, you know what? There's historical precedent for this. We used to have in Washington State 3 times more tracks. There were probably 10 times more rail jobs. And 15% of that track mileage in 1928 was electrified. 760 miles of rail in Washington State was electrified in 1928. It was already using regenerative braking like Priuses. When it went around, slowed down or down a mountain or around a curve, and putting power back into the overhead lines as early as 1915. So 100 years ago, we knew how to do this. So this is not some like Elon Musk pipe dream. This is not the Jetsons. This is something we already know how to do. So, yeah, normally I would show you the chart. I think it'd be impossible to read at this point. So, the Milwaukee Road was one of the electrified rail systems that terminated in Washington State, and it terminated in Tacoma. And so, in one of our renderings, we have the City of Destiny with have the intermodal freight be immediately loaded onto electrified rail cars. We want the key to making this successful, and for the railroad companies, is to transfer freight business or market share off of the trucks that are clogging the freeways and doing a significant damage over to the trains. And that means that we have to increase the speed of the trains, their regularity, and the chart up on the screen, what it shows is that the commodity value that transports on rail is now 3% of commodities are 3% of the value of commodities are transported on rail. 70% of the commodities are transported on trucks. Now, you may have heard that long-haul trucking is having a hard time filling jobs, that it's a very difficult lifestyle. Well, imagine if we, instead of having these large hubs, imagine if, well, I should back it up and say, cargo doesn't usually get onto a train these days unless it's going to travel 500 to 750 miles minimum. That means by the time it gets to someplace, then it has to get onto a truck and travel potentially another 300 miles back in another direction. This is a very inefficient system, and it also impacts community by concentrating warehouses and concentrating diesel emissions in communities. Think of it more as mycelium. Think of it if there were more frequent stops on faster trains that were able to get the trucks, the freight that would normally travel on trucks to market cheaply and quickly. We could pull some of that 70% of the value of freight off of the freeways, unclog our roads, and put it back onto tracks. It takes about 5,000 cars to equal the same wear and tear on the freeway system as one tractor trailer. So a great deal of the damage is done by those trucks. If we could shorten the distance they travel and take the long haul trucks off, have the short and medium haul trucks, we have actually a potential of electrifying those as well. We could decarbonize not just the trains, but also the trucks that move things that final stretch of the route. The other advantage of this public belt of the Solutionary Rail is proposing is the idea of using those existing rail rights-of-way as electric transmission superhighways. It's very difficult and expensive to create new pathways for electric transmission or high-speed rail. But we could use and get higher speed rail onto existing tracks up to 110 miles an hour and utilize the space above those tracks for electrical transmission so that we could start moving the wind and solar that's currently what some would call a stranded asset in the middle of the country and down in the southwest to population centers. We could utilize those rural electrical cooperatives to power the locomotives that are pulling our cargo, and they could export power to population centers. 75% of the landmass of the United States is served by rural electrical cooperatives that were set up in the mid-1930s. I think that's pretty fascinating. But they're very in debt. They're also indebted and invested in coal generation and natural gas generation. So they need a new way out of that debt. And having an additional load, additional market, and the capacity to use their networks to transmit distributed renewable energy through their communities, but also then to other population centers, could be a real boon to those local economies. In 2015, a group of NOAA scientists did a study on how would we get to 80% renewable energy by 2030. And key to that was distributed renewable generation. Yes, but more importantly was high voltage transmission network that doesn't currently exist. High voltage DC has the capacity to move electricity from point to point much more efficiently than high voltage AC. So their grid, if you can see the lines on this screen, is very similar to this grid. This is the existing rail, and this is the National Association of Rail Passengers map of current and their proposed rail corridors for passenger. So I'll go back and show you. See how the density of that grid is almost identical? Very complementary. So the rail system provides that kind of right-of-way for electrical transmission. If we could use these major corridors, like these, the darker lines are freight by volume. Hey, Lars. Freight by volume. We could both serve local economies. We could help the railroads be profitable and gain market share, and we could help speed up and draw passengers to the railroads once again. So we want to draw both passengers and freight back to the railroads, and we think that there are a lot of allies in this fight, and I think this is why there's a sense of inevitability about it, because you have already railroad labor, which we'll get into. We have the environmentalists, the sustainability folks. We have the service of rural economies. We also have the tribes. Tribes have a lot of the renewable energy assets in this country, and the railroad corridors that we're talking about pass right through those tribal lands. Those tribes could also export energy. Standing Rock is one of 29 tribes who participated in a marketing effort to draw in wind developers and investors. Standing Rock has a BNSF line that runs right through it. Standing Rock tribe is not just fighting pipelines, they're actually asking for and leading the way in renewable energy development. So why not let the tribes lead the way in harnessing the renewable energy? And maybe the tribes could actually be at least in part, the owners of this new tax-exempt electrification infrastructure. The Makah were actually also part of that study. And if we look to other places in Washington State, like Grays Harbor has wind assets. It has a Puget Sound and Pacific Railroad. It could be moving wind energy to the I-5 corridor. So there's a lot of winners in this, and one of those winners is labor. It's really hard to fathom how railroad labor exists in this current business model. These people are on call 24/7. They get no fixed days off, no weekends. Their point system for evaluating whether they're punished or rewarded is very punitive, and these folks, they can't have a life really that's the quality of life is very diminished by this schedule. Having fixed schedules with trains that move quickly will serve both the workers and the folks who want to move goods. So one of their key allies in this has been Railroad Workers United. Railroad Workers United is a confederation of the 13 craft unions that work in rail. Labor in Washington State has been very supportive of Solutionary Rail. Last summer, the Washington State Labor Council passed a resolution at their convention, urging Governor Inslee to invest in feasibility study for Solutionary Rail. Backbone Campaign and the Solutionary Rail Project has also joined a coalition called the Moving Forward Network. It's a coalition of environmental justice organizations that work to counter the negative impacts of diesel emissions in communities, fence-line communities. Folks who are along tracks or near ports or in inland ports or these large warehouse spaces. So the Moving Forward Network is made up of groups that are mostly the poor and urban poor and people of communities of color. They're the ones who are most deeply impacted by the current freight system and the exhaust of these rail yards and the trucks and the warehouses that they serve. A place like Kansas City, a neighborhood near Kansas City, gets 4,000 trucks a day going through their community. Now, if those trucks were electrified and taking a shorter trip at that hub, those communities would not be as impacted. If the rail cars that were coming in weren't sitting in a yard idling all day spewing diesel, those communities would not be impacted by the health effects of diesel. And right now they have no hope. All they can tell their elders and their kids is to stay inside. So places like Grays Harbor and other rural communities around the country have a lot to gain from rail electrification and this transformation of our freight rail infrastructure. These boarded up train stations are just a symbol of the past vitality of rural communities. There's no reason why our rural communities should suffer culturally or economically for their location. We actually need to revitalize those communities. And I think having a transportation infrastructure that serves them properly, both with freight so that they can manufacture, that they can generate renewable energy to power that decarbonized freight system, and for the transportation and access to culture and society by a faster rail system, I think that's a win for everybody. Another final interest group is fishermen. We fight to save the orcas, right? They need the Chinook salmon, and they can't get up the Snake River. Well, those dams that exist on the Snake River are principally for barging wheat. And why are they barging wheat? Because they can't get guaranteed capacity and access to the railroads. If we can give those farmers access to the rails, then we can give them a way to let go of those dams that are harming fishermen and harming Chinook and orca. So right now we're working to grow a coalition of stakeholders, labor, tribes, environmental justice communities, environmentalists, sustainability advocates, rural communities, and we could use your support because this is a bottom-up campaign. Our elected officials, sadly, listen to who's got the bucks. So when Bill Gates gets excited about a 250-mile train that might happen from Seattle to Vancouver, Jay Inslee, bends over backwards to make sure that they get feasibility study money. Well, why is Bill Gates asking the taxpayers of Washington State for feasibility study money? For something that's actually already been studied. Since 1990, we've been studying high-speed rail. You can't go 250 miles an hour. It doesn't work from Seattle to Vancouver because you have to stop in Everett and Bellingham. So the optimum speed is 110 miles an hour. It's already been studied. But because of the corruption in our political system, those folks get the bucks. The engineering firms that appeal to folks like folks like Microsoft that appeal to our elected officials, they're the ones who get the study. That's why it's really, really important that grassroots folks pass resolutions of support for feasibility study money for Solutionary Rail. We've got partners at Washington State University who are eager to do the feasibility and the cost-benefit analysis to check, to refine the Solutionary Rail strategy. And so if there are any questions, I'm sure I'm starting to run out of time. I mean, we started real late, so I'm happy to answer questions. But you can check out Solutionary Rail online at solutionaryrail.org. You can send me an email, bill@solutionaryrail.org. And I have books here at the front of the stage and pamphlets on Solutionary Rail, and I invite you to grab one of those. So are there any questions?
How much do the books cost?
The books we suggest a donation of $20.
And which groups do you work together with on this?
Which groups do we work together with? Well, Backbone Campaign is the principal organization that has been developed the Solutionary Rail idea. But again, we have worked with the Washington State Labor Council on this. Sierra Club Washington, just in May, passed a statewide resolution in support of Solutionary Rail. We do a lot of activism with folks like 350 Seattle, Fellowship of Reconciliation, etc. And we're actually going to be having an action camp that's going to celebrate both resistance and strong principled direct action, along with solutionary propositional action organizing, like Solutionary Rail, tool libraries, credit unions, etc., building the sustainable society that we want, that serves all of us, because fundamentally we're all in this together.
It sounds to me too, Bill, that you're asking for, you're not asking for the taxpayers to take this on, you're asking for investors
Yeah.
who are already investing in awkward ways.
That's right.
To get involved.
That's
so
right.
this is one of those things too. Our taxpayer money goes extensively to help fix our highways where the heavy traffic and the heavy freight is being transported. And this is just one of those things, solutionary. I like it because here's the deal. We're going to always be sitting there waiting for someone in government to do things for us. But here's a man right here on this stage that is already doing these things. He's getting the people together. I really encourage you to get a hold of this book and read it so you know exactly what your future. How many people here are actually thinking about what their future is going to look like, or better yet, what the future of your 10 and under children are going to look like? How many people here are really thinking about that today? Anybody? Anybody? How about you guys in the street out there? I know the food is very tempting, but I'm not going to eat that.
Yeah, it's a good point. That this would be financed through bonds, issued, not tax-exempt bonds issued by
investors.
Yeah.
Very good. I like that a lot. So please come up and are you going to be around for a minute, Bill?
Yeah, sure.
Come by and talk to this man and pick his brains. There's a lot of things to learn here. And I just want to give you one small example of where this power can come from. I don't know if anybody knows it, but this stage has been running for a day and a half almost now on solar power. You see the big solar panel over here? That's powering this stage right here. We had concerts last night with big equipment up here all the way till 10 o'clock. And that was all done by solar power. So it does work.
Who provided that power?
That's a very good question. Thank you. So over here at the corner, you'll see West Seattle Natural Energy. They have been solarizing homes. And like I say today, I was talking about this earlier. This is approaches to transition day. We are going to be talking about transition all day long. And one of the things that you're seeing on your neighbor's house and possibly your house is the use of solar panels. Solar panels are going up around West Seattle. It's a very good place. Later today, Keith Hughes of West Seattle Natural Energy will be on this stage to explain to you how the cost of solar can benefit you. It's a long-term situation we got going on here. You get your solar panels, you convert to electric heat, you convert to electric vehicles, you convert to electricity throughout your life, and you will find that you're going to save money. You're going to reduce your cost of energy, your cost of transportation, your cost of all those things that let the fire department go. You are going to reduce your cost of everything that you're laying out dollars on currently. You are the investor. It's very important to know where your money goes. Your yes is very important to consider, because where your money goes is what causes the status quo and the resistance to transition. So transition's going to happen with or without you. I recommend you get on board. So in just a minute, we're going to have another group up here. We have projects in Sustainable West Seattle. By the way, you are sitting at the Sustainable West Seattle Green Life stage, sponsored by Sustainable West Seattle. We have many corporate sponsors involved with this one too. West Seattle Natural Energy, Alki Bike and Board. We also have Car2Go. We have Waste Management, Full Circle Farms. You want to get your produce, and you want to get it fresh from the farm, visit Full Circle Farms right across the way here. And then we are also being sponsored by PCC Natural Markets. They're giving out free samples today. I would be in that line at some point rather than this one over here. So just to let you know, I've been calling Keith the wrong name for a long time now. Their name is now West Seattle Electric and Solar. I like it because it does make all the sense in the world. Electric and solar, that's where we're going in this world. Thank you.